Good morning. My name is Mark Trummel, board member and past chair. Virginia Ability welcomes you to our program, What is Website Accessibility and Why Does It Matter?, hosted by Red Orange Studios. Our presenters are Melissa Dolly, senior web developer, and Susie Fife, the president and CEO of Red Orange. Melissa and Susie will discuss the benefits of website accessibility, design tips, and best practices for implementing and maintaining an accessible site. First, Maxwell Ivy will introduce the program. You can follow Max on his website, theblindblogger.net. Over to you, Max.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to business people about this important subject. And y'all are probably expecting me to tell you today that you need to make your sites and your apps accessible because it'll protect you from lawsuits. You're probably expecting maybe I'll talk about how it can keep you away from a social media backlash. And you may even think I'm going to say it because it's the right thing to do. But the real honest answer is accessibility is in your best interest and in the best interest of your business. You know, over 20 years ago, when Steve Jobs decided to add accessibility to the iPod and later laptops and mobile devices, he didn't do that because he was a good guy. He did it because he saw our aging population and figured that it was just a matter of time before people would need and want devices that could magnify the images on the screen, have text-to-speech for screen readers, and talk-to-text for dictation. And obviously, he's been proven right because I doubt any of us could get through our day now without help from Google, Alexa, Siri, or all of the above. And the truth is, most of your visitors and your competitors are depending on these mobile devices. And the great thing about accessibility is by making your websites more accessible, you make them easier to communicate with all these other products that are out there, these mobile devices and the voice-activated devices. So it is definitely in your best interest. And they asked me to share a specific item or two with y'all today that you can improve your site by accessibility that would also improve your business, or at least give you a better chance with our community. And so I thought about something that isn't really included in accessibility a lot, and that's just the simple design. Building websites with a minimal number of links, buttons, images, and then making sure that those links direct people to the reason they came to your website. So you want to make the most important thing, and make it easier for us to find those things quickly. Because if we don't find them quickly or easily, if we have to think about it and hunt and peck, we will go to somebody else's website. Very few of us are Amazon or Walmart where we have no competitors. And especially when you're creating a form, and the forms are the lifeblood of a business, whether it's a contact form, a form to purchase a service, or your checkout form. When these things are not accessible to a disabled person, the odds are they're not accessible or enjoyable to a sighted person or an able-bodied person. And by fixing these things, making them simpler, having less items, forcing a form to go over more than one screen or more than one page, you make them more accessible. You also make them more viewable on mobile devices, which is where people are getting their information to make their purchasing decisions, and where many of them are actually making their purchases. So while it may not seem sexy, it is something y'all can do pretty easily, and something you're probably already thinking about. So make the most important thing, and make it easy for me to find my way there quickly with the least amount of roadblocks to my navigating with a screen reader or a screen magnification device. The second reason y'all want to do this is because the amount of the disability community is only just beginning to be completely understood. Just this morning, I received a link from a friend on LinkedIn that said just in the United States alone, the purchasing power of people with disabilities is almost $500 billion a year. $500 billion a year. That's just, and we can argue over the numbers, but that's just the person with a disability. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And even if we consider that 1 in 10 people in the US have a disability, that's still 35 million people. Most people think it's 1 in 5, which would be 60 to 70 million people. And I doubt any of us can afford to leave an audience that big behind. Then when you add our friends, our family, our coworkers, our social media followers to that group, it gets even bigger. But that's not even the end of it. The end of it is we are generally loyal consumers. If you make a quality product or service and you make it easy for us to communicate with you to buy and use that product and service, we will stick with you. And there isn't a business person alive that doesn't realize it's easier to keep existing customers and much more financially sensible than just to constantly have to be chasing after new customers. So you can reach a highly loyal, huge, untapped community of people who will not only buy, but advocate for your products, your services, and your content. And just one little thing I learned this week, a lot of people, when they view videos, and I'm not sure all of y'all do videos, but the ones you do, 37% of people won't even look at a video if it doesn't have closed captioning, because they're watching these videos at work, on the subway, on the train, on the plane, on the bus, and sometimes even in their cars. So accessibility is definitely in your business advantage. By doing it, you make your websites, your apps, and your content more accessible and enjoyable and usable to all your other consumers. And you get the opportunity to stand out among a community of buyers who will stick with you as long as you continue to make us welcome. And I hope that gets us off to a good start. And I hope that's what you were hoping for. And I'm going to pass it back over to Mark now so he can introduce our primary speakers.
All right. Thank you, Max. So we're going to begin with Melissa Dolly, Senior Web Developer at Red Orange.
Good morning, everyone. Susie, were you going to start? Yep. And thank you, Max, for that great opening. First, we're going to introduce ourselves a little bit and talk about who we are. I'm the Senior Web Developer at Red Orange Studio. For a long time, I was just a freelancer doing what I do, and then just was looking for a company that cared in the same way I did and found Red Orange. And with Red Orange, I've been able to really embrace the accessibility world and care, give back and care about what I care about. Susie is our CEO. Susie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I have owned Red Orange since 2005, started it then, and started it at the foundation of web design and brand design. Got into WordPress over 10 years ago and into accessibility design about 5 years ago. Was so fortunate to be able to hire Melissa several years ago, who's really grown our skill set and ability in delivering accessible websites. And Max, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you. That was a great springboard into what we want to discuss today. And I, as a designer, have really appreciated how designing with accessibility in mind only helps us with our user experience even more. It makes us better designers. And we're so thankful for the work that has been done in this area. So thank you for that. And just a little bit more about Red Orange. It's about 13 of us between Virginia Beach and Richmond areas. And in addition to web design, we do brand and marketing. So able to serve mostly B2B clients, a lot of nonprofits, and we're really thankful for our community and the work that we get to do alongside business owners and marketing directors in our community. Thank you for Virginia Ability for having us today. We really appreciate it. Love to jump in a little bit just to kind of get a basic understanding of what website accessibility is. And Max already started us off in chatting about why it matters so much. And Melissa, I'll let you take it from here.
Right. So when we're talking about website accessibility, fundamentally, it means that websites, tools, And technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities can use them. And then more specifically, that people can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the web, and that they can contribute to the web. It's really important that we're thinking of everybody when we're thinking of websites. You don't want to exclude up to 20% of the people that can use your website. And so when we're talking about website accessibility, it's just meaning that everybody has access to your website. When we're talking about it, it's all anything that could impact somebody's ability to use your website. So we're speaking about auditory, physically, cognitively, speech, neurologically, and visual. So yes, you want to have your forms working correctly, and yes, you want your links to be ADA compliant, but then you also want to make sure that your videos have captions or that any downloadable content is ADA compliant. You want to cover all of the bases so that anyone with any disability is able to use your website.
The one I often don't hear people talking about is the cognitive and neurological as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where even writing your content in a way where the readability level is accessible to most people, I think is something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We all, you're in your business and you know what you're talking about, but that doesn't necessarily mean that someone coming to your site understands all the things. And I believe, Susie, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're saying that your website content should be written for, I think, a 5th grade level, generally.
Generally speaking, you know, it
Yeah.
depends on who your target audience is, but yeah, it's and that again, I love that it crosses over to other practices when it comes to good design. People aren't going to see on your website if you've got a lot of content, no matter what your ability level is.
Yeah, because it's not just about the how your content is written, it's also length of content. If you have written 10 paragraphs for one page, someone's gonna get tired even if they don't have a cognitive disability. By the time they get to the second paragraph, you have a small amount of time to capture someone's attention. And so it's about writing content that is accessible for everybody. So why does it matter? And Max touched on a lot of this, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more in detail. Why we do it is because it's the right thing to do. It's just the right thing to do to make sure that everybody feels included, to make sure that you're accepting and have a welcoming environment. It's the right thing to do. But as a business owner, the right thing to do is nice, but that doesn't mean financially that you have the time to invest in making your site ADA compliant. So why else might you want to do it? One, you're improving the internet for everybody. Anytime you make sure that a button is readable, that it's in the appropriate part on the page, you make sure that your images have alt tags, or you are making sure that your form is accessible. That makes it easier for people without disabilities as well. You have the opportunity to increase your audience by up to 20%. As a business owner, if I told you you can do this one thing and potentially increase your audience by 20%, you would 100% do it. 100% of the time you're doing it. But why aren't we doing that with ADA? Up to 20, probably 25% of people who use the internet have some sort of thing that hinders them from being able to use it properly. And so why would you not just be ADA compliant and potentially increase your audience by 20 to 25%? Speaking to that as well, it's good for SEO in general. When you look at the rules for ADA compliance, you're also going to get pinged for those same things for SEO, making sure that your headings are correct, making sure that your images are described. All of these things are good for SEO in general. You're also hopefully going to avoid lawsuits. It's not incredibly common, but it's becoming more common that you can be sued in a civil complaint. Aside from a lawsuit being complaint being filed, you can actually be sued in a civil complaint if your website is not accessible, the same way you would be sued if you had a building and you didn't offer a way for someone in a wheelchair to get in. And so for all these reasons, it is good for your business to make sure that your website is ADA compliant.
Thanks, Melissa. I put a little screenshot over here, and I'm going to share my screen to show this. I just got to unshare and then reshare. I'll also take my my microphone out so that you guys can hear the audio. Wondering if anybody saw this commercial over Super Bowl, and I thought it was just really a great visual. And this is specific to a mobile device, so not website, but it's the same idea, and I thought it'd be fun to watch together. You guys see my screen okay?
Yes, Susie.
Awesome, thank you. Let's start at the beginning here.
For many people with blindness or low vision, there hasn't always been an easy way to capture daily life.
One face cropped. Move your phone down. One face in frame. Hold for photo.
One. Hello.
One face and one head in frame.
Look who's here.
Two faces in frame. Two faces.
Let's stay in the new place.
Two faces. Two faces. Two faces in frame. Three faces in frame. Hold for photo.
Capture life, no matter how you experience it. Guided frame only on Google Pixel. For many people with
I think that ad did such a great job of showing us the experience of somebody with a disability. And I think it's just important for us to continue to empathize and understand what all of our users experience when they come to our website. And I'll get back over to our PowerPoint presentation. We're going to dive into a little bit. This is getting pretty technical as far as the legal part of things, but Melissa talked about the possibility of a lawsuit or filing claims, and just a little bit about who enforces the guidelines. And Melissa, I'll let you take it from here.
So in 1990, the American with Disabilities Act was passed that made it illegal for any government or business to provide goods and services to the public that are not also accessible to people who have disabilities. And so it's under that law that generally you would have a complaint filed against you, or you would get a civil suit filed against you. In 2010, specifically, we got the standards for accessible design that applied the ADA Act to electronic and information technology like websites. So it's through the ADA Act, and in 2010, it officially applied that law to websites, making them, what's the word I'm looking for, Susie?
Enforcing them to be accessible. Yeah. And
yeah.
Yep. And then it was kind of further enforced through time and through guidelines. The thing about some of these acts is that they're not really specific on how to make your website or technical platform accessible. And that's where the guidelines have been developed.
So there are guidelines through WCAG. And while it gets confusing because we're going to go through what the levels are, there's no specific legal guideline on what level of accessibility you need to be. The specific verbiage is you need to have a reasonable accommodation, but there's no further guidelines on what that is. So the development community has had to sort of figure out what that is. And generally we say that's AA compliance. And so you have the web content accessibility guidelines that were created by the Web Accessibility Initiative, and you can view that at w3.org. So when we're talking about what the guidelines are, it's 13 guidelines organized under 4 principles. We want it to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. When we're talking about perceivable, it means that the users must be able to perceive the information being presented. It can't be invisible to all of their senses. They have to be able to perceive it from your website. Operable means that users must be able to operate the interface, so it cannot require interaction that a user can't perform. They have to be able to get to it and operate it. Understandable means that the users must be able to understand the information as well as the operation of the user interface. So the content and the operation cannot be beyond their understanding. They must be able to see it, operate it, and understand it. Then it also must be robust. Content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents and including assistive technologies. So it must be robust in that a lot of different types of users can use it, and that screen readers and any sort of assistive technology can access it. When we're talking about the levels of compliance, and we mentioned this a bit ago, where the development community has decided that the middle range compliance is what is legally going to keep you safe. There are 3 different levels. You have A compliance, which is the lowest range. AA means you're in the middle, and AAA is going to be the highest level of compliance. When you're looking at being A compliance, your text must be resizable up to 200%. All your images must have descriptive alt text, and links must have descriptive names. All your pages have to have a title, and you have to have navigation that does not require a mouse. The important thing when you're looking at these levels is it doesn't matter if you have everything but one thing in A compliant. If you don't have all of the things in A compliance, then you are not compliant. You could have all of the things in level A compliance, AA compliance, and AAA compliance. If you're missing one thing in A compliance, you're not compliant at all. When you get into AA compliance, then your text needs to be resizable up to 400%. So when we're talking about resizable, think that you're on your phone and you zoom in. For a while, websites were making it because it was messing with design. If you zoomed in and out, they were making it so you could not zoom into websites. And of course, that's not accessible. You have to have captions for your audio and video. You have to have more than one way to navigate your website. So obviously, probably the majority of us use your mouse, but you should also have tab targeting or other options. And all your forms can be completed without the use of a mouse. Again, that's where we get into tab targeting and all of those things. So AAA compliance, your text needs to be resizable up to 800%. Your color contrast ratios go up. In AA compliance, you want a 4.5 to 1. In AAA, you need to have 7 to 1. So that's going to be if you have a link and a background color, making sure that you can see that well. At least one way to navigate using only the keyboard, so you no longer have to use your mouse. And all content must be accessible to people with cognitive disabilities. And so that's where we get into talking about how you write your content, the length of your content. You're paying a lot more attention to content than you are design and development once you get into AAA compliance. When you're testing your site for accessibility, there are a lot of tools out there that can help you. Some common ones that we use are Site Improve, which is a paid tool, and so that can be complicated. Lighthouse, which is built into Google Chrome. Our favorite tool is Wave, which is a free extension you can install and test the accessibility of any page you're on. There are also other browser extensions, like a color contrast analyzer or a headings map. You could do manual testing and user feedback, and you always should. Accessibility consultants and auditors, and then online resources and guides like WebAIM. All of the resources are there and free to use. These are some screenshots of what you can expect in these tools. With WebAIM, we frequently use their color contrast analyzer just for a quick check on things, but then you can also install an add-on to Chrome. Site Improve is a paid resource, but that's going to test to a very high level your accessibility as well as SEO and other factors.
I really like WebAIM's regular newsletter as well. They come out with updates as far as accessibility. So if you go to that website and sign up for their newsletter, you'll get regular email updates on what's new in the world of accessibility.
Which is important because this is something that everyone's still finding their way through, and that the legal system is still finding their way through. And so laws change, requirements change. So web accessibility isn't just a one and done thing. You have to make sure that you're staying on top of it to make sure that your site continues to be accessible to everyone.
And then we all know technology changes. And of course, as
Absolutely.
a business owner, I know business changes. So it is an evolving process.
We do have a tool that you can get a quick analyzation of how your website is as far as accessibility. You can go to ismywebsiteaccessible.com, and that will give you just the headlines. We're looking at alt tags, color contrast, headings, if you have an assigned language, and that you have form field labels.
And we'll dive into that a little bit more here next.
So, best practices in website accessibility. We sort of talked about what it is, why you should do it, and ways to test it. But what are the best practices in website accessibility? Susie, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, great. So on the design side, we've got this kind of grouped between both design and development. And of course, there is some crossover. So let's say you're maintaining your own website, you have a designer who's doing some refreshed pages, or you're getting a whole new site designed. You really want to kind of focus in on some of these core elements of the guidelines, which are font size. You really don't want to go below 16 pixels or 1 EM, another responsive way to measure font size. They don't necessarily categorize or specify the WCAG guidelines don't say you have to fit to 16 point, but that is something we have seen and recommend. Color contrast is a huge thing. So when you pull up the Wave tool and you start assessing your site, that is one of the things we see often that gets missed. And sometimes it's as you're maintaining your site, a color gets added and you don't realize that when you place black text on that color, it's not visible for people who have visual impairment. The contrast might not even be there for people who have great vision. So color contrast is something to really keep in mind from a design perspective. The body copy, so that 16-point text, you really want to keep it at a 4:5:1 ratio. And the headers, since they're a little larger, you could get away with a little less contrast at 3:1 ratio. So if you have questions on that, we'll have a question and answer time. We can walk through what that looks like. Also, and we do a little bit of demo on the Bridge Ability site. Links. It's really important that there is a way for a user to know that they have landed on a link. And so we like to encourage, as far as the designs we work on, an underline for a hyperlink, but it can be a second way. So if you're hovering over a link and it changes color, there actually needs to be 2 ways. So that's where we feel like underline is that second way. If it hovers to a different color, also adding an underline is an indicator that this is a link.
And it's an important thing, Susie, that I want to mention, because we talked about how laws can change and rules can change. And this was something that changed for a long time. We thought it was okay. You make your link a different color. Like that's how you make it, indicate it, and that's how you make it accessible. But about, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, WCAG came out and said, that's not enough. You have to have 2 indicators. There has to be something other than a color change to indicate that this is a link. And that's why it's important to make sure that ADA compliance is something that you're constantly doing. It's not a one-time thing when you first launch your website.
Good reminder. Thank you. Line height, that's the space between each line of text in your body copy. You want to give enough breathing room between your lines of copy, and that's a great rule for design overall. So I love the 1.5 recommended line height size. That should say line height, not font size. That is really important from a design perspective too. You want to have white space and breathing space to read.
Yeah, it makes sense from just a readability for everybody. Logistically, why it is important for ADA compliance is because, one, if you're on your phone and you try to click something and there's not enough line height, you can't quite click it. But also reading, if you have any sort of cognitive disability that impacts how you read, if your letters and lines are squished together, then someone might not actually be able to read all the things you've written.
That's great. Here's one of the color contrast tools our design team uses. And I know we're talking specifically about websites, but Melissa made a great point earlier that anything that's downloadable off of your website, if it's a PDF, make sure you're using and considering color contrast with the colors you've used in the PDF as well. That kind of showed how another tool looks. So you'll see you've got color 1 is white, color 2 is black, and that's going to provide a very high contrast ratio of 21:1, which is great. Well, I don't know if that's what I think it's certain sizes, but if you were to put a white into color 1 and then a light gray into color 2, and you're trying to use those two colors with each other, it's going to be very low contrast and it's not going to be ADA compliant. This is a slide off of our style guide, and we make style guides for clients with recommendations on what colors work with each other from an ADA compliance standpoint. So you'll see that we've shown the text on top of the colors that are AA compliant. So that I'm not putting red. So you'll see I've got like let's look at the red color in the upper left. I've got white, robin egg, and parchment. Those three colors work well on red. But if I see something, or one of my art directors sees us using orange on red, they're going to flag it and say that's not going to be compliant. It's not really the best combination anyway for varied abilities, but for somebody that has a visual impairment or color blindness or color contrast challenges, that's not going to be enough contrast for it to be accessible. So encourage you and your design teams or any designers you're working with or an internal marketing team to use these color contrast tools and define what colors in your brand work well with each other and are accessible, and then put it in your guidelines. So whenever you're working on any materials, even outside your website, you are considering color contrast. Again, it's a great design principle in addition to an accessibility principle.
And I would say that in design, the colors are where there's the largest sticking point for designers and brands. It's really hard as a business owner. You've spent time designing this logo and all the colors that go with it, and then you go to build a website and you have someone telling you you can't use that color. You have to pick a different color, and that's why it's important to be open and be willing to make those shifts. That doesn't mean you can't use any of that color you've picked, but maybe for reading purposes, there's a better color we can go with. And it's just getting over that hump, I think, in design. That can be the struggle for brands.
Melissa, as a developer, does such a great job with us as designers in collaborating with us and ensuring we're using the right colors for accessibility. Melissa, do you want to talk a little bit about some developer tips?
Absolutely. With development and design, I would say accessibility is easier when you approach it that way at the beginning. So you're thinking about ADA compliance before you ever put in a line of code. But that's not always the case. So you want to hit the big things that are going to make your website easier to use for people with disabilities. That's going to be a skip link. If you go to any website and press the tab button on your keyboard, there should be a button that pops up that allows you to skip to the main content. Otherwise, if somebody has a screen reader, in order to get to your main content, they're going to have to go through everything that's in your header, all of your links. And I imagine that can be frustrating.
On
You
every
need to have-
page.
Yeah,
Right.
on every page. So you go to the about page and now you have to hear all of the navigation and all of the top navigation. And that's someone's going to get frustrated and leave your website. You need to make sure you have proper heading tags. And this is something we've been screaming from the rooftops for years. It used to be primarily because of SEO. And yes, it is because of SEO. But now we're talking about ADA compliance and how screen readers are able to navigate your website. So you want to make sure that every page has an H1 at the top and that you're going through the heading tags in order. So H1, H2, H3. Links, you want to make sure that all of your links have some sort of descriptive text. The common thing we see on websites is that in the footer, you might put your social links. You have your Facebook or LinkedIn icon, and it's just an icon wrapped with a link wrapped around it. There's nothing descriptive to say what that link is for. So you want to make sure that all your links have some sort of text attached. What we commonly do is use a screen reader class so that we can take the text off the screen for people who are viewing the website, but a screen reader will still read it so they know where they're going. Alt tags, make sure all your images have alt tags. Make sure they are properly describing what's in the image or what the image is for. Again, all of these things are positive things for SEO. All of these things are good things for anybody using your website, but it's going to be especially helpful for anyone that has a disability. Form field labels. For a long time, we loved putting in placeholder text in forms to where you just saw first name in the form field, but that's not readable by a screen reader. Also, some people can't see it if it's not good color contrast. So you want to make sure now that all of your form fields has an associated label so that anyone can see, okay, this is where I put my first name. This is where I put my last name, so on. So from a developer standpoint, you want to just make sure that these are the big markers you're hitting.
We've got just some examples of websites that can be beautifully designed and still be ADA compliant. This is a healthcare website and a client that we have to be very cognizant of. In fact, that's the one that we use, the Site Improve paid tool. And we are accountable to reaching a certain accessibility score percentage.
Absolutely. When you're talking about that A, AA, and AAA, as a private business owner, you can get sued and you're going to do your best, but you have things like healthcare, government, that have a really strict legal obligation to be at least AA compliant.
Great. Well, we hope that was helpful. We thought we would provide an example of auditing the Virginia accessibility site using our Wave tool. I have that pulled up, Melissa, but would you prefer to do it on your end?
You can do it if you have it pulled up.
Yeah. Just gonna reach my other window to share. All right, so again, you can get this Chrome, this specifically is the Chrome browser. You can get that through WebAIM or just look up Wave Evaluation Tool. I've added it to Chrome so that it's a browser extension up here. And then once you have that extension activated, you can go to any site and just click your little W button and get an assessment of where that page is landing. I love this tool because it also tells you what you're doing right, which is great to see. So you can see here on the left, I am on the increasing workforce diversity in Virginia page. So I've gone into an interior page and it's looking pretty good. We only have one error. We don't have any contrast issues. We've got some alerts, which again, something to keep in mind when you use these tools, and Melissa, you can speak to this a little bit more, is they're developed to give you an idea, but it's not always completely accurate. And that's why Melissa said, you know, hey, use the screen recorder. You know, look at what this device looks like zoomed in at 200%. Share it with somebody that might have a varied ability and get some input, because these tools are not completely 100% accurate, but this one is very, very good. And we do, like, you can kind of go into the details as you go into these tabs.
When you go into details, you're going to get into the alerts. It becomes overwhelming and confusing for just random people just wanting to test their website. But if you're using something like this, what you're looking at is for that errors. So it's saying that there's a missing form label, which we talked about that. All your forms have to have labels. And it's a small thing compared to some other websites. It's just one small thing, but it is important. But it can be, you can look at the tool and see that it's kind of overwhelming. There's a lot going on in there. So don't feel overwhelmed by it. And if it feels confusing, there are a lot of people out there that you can just reach out to that are willing to help you.
And I thought it'd be helpful to show the one color contrast issue on the homepage and kind of explain that. So overall, the brand colors as they're being used are compliant from a contrast level, but you'll see there's one contrast error here, and that what it looks to be, and you can see it right here. Here's the red signal that's the color contrast issue. It looks to be a button that was added at some point, and the purple was used.
Yeah, they just maybe wanted it to stick out a little more, be a little different than the button above it. And so it's like, okay, we'll make it this purple. But that white on that light purple is not ADA compliant.
Right.
So it's very important, not to say that Virginia Ability is. It's very important not to be cavalier with your colors, not to just be like, oh, we'll make it this, to be purposeful and have intention behind every color you're putting on your website.
Great. Thanks, Melissa. Mark, we'll turn it over to you for Q&A.
Okay.
If you have any questions, you can type it into the Q&A or type it into the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you.
And we are here for anything from a design or development or just general ADA compliance, anything you have to ask. We are here for anything you need.
All righty, so I have the first question. The question is, will you be able to email the slides to attendees?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can get those out once the webinar is complete. And the second question was, will this webinar be available for recording later? Yes, we're going to send this out as well to those who have registered for the webinar. Question is, I hear there are fonts that are appropriate for people with dyslexia. Do you have examples?
There are fonts that are appropriate. You're mostly going to be looking at, you have serif fonts and sans serif fonts. You want to look at sans serif fonts, so they're not going to have a lot of flicks off the letters. It's also going to have enough spacing between the letters is going to be important. I don't have any specific examples, but that when you're looking at your fonts, make sure that if you have trouble reading it as a person without any sort of impairment, if you have trouble reading it, then certainly other people are going to have trouble reading it.
Great.
Yeah, we use Calibri, not sure if I'm saying that right, and Open Sans a lot. Those are really great readable sans serif body copy fonts.
Yeah.
The next question is, we are often asked to post a PDF on the website. We then take the content on the PDF and post it on the web page. Is there anything else we can do or should do should be doing to ensure compliance?
It's a great question. Adobe has a tool built into it that will check your PDF for ADA compliance. And so I would definitely run that. And I assume you're posting the content so that it is accessible outside of the PDF. I would just make sure when you're sort of copying and pasting outside of the PDF that you're making sure random headings aren't getting, anytime you're copying and pasting from one tool into any content editor, you could have problems with headings or anything like that. So just make sure that your HTML looks right, that your headings are correct. But I think it's great what you're doing, Kathleen, that you're going that extra step to make sure that content's accessible.
Yeah, and I've seen from a design perspective too, of course, when you're designing for print or PDF kind of layout, you have a lot more design capability than on a website. So there might be more like texted an image. There's just some of those, any kind of imagery you're using. If it's an infographic, you're going to want to pull it out into pieces and make sure there's not text overlaying your image. You don't typically want to use text within an image file.
Yeah, you don't want your text to be an image. And that was something I think developmentally we were doing for a short little moment where it's like you just want your website to look nice. And so I'm just gonna design a thing and put my image up there that contains the text. But then a screen reader can't read it. You don't know who can access it. So I think you're doing a great job with what you're doing, Kathleen. Is just making sure that everything is accessible, and it seems like you're doing a good job.
And you're
That's
making your
great.
content more optimized for SEO too.
Exactly.
So kudos for that.
Google, that's something when we're talking about accessibility, we're also talking about SEO. Your content in a PDF isn't necessarily indexed by Google. Anything that's hidden, everybody loves an accordion where you have drop-down content. From an HTML perspective, that content is hidden from Google. It's not getting indexed by Google. And so you're not getting SEO value from it. So any content that is not indexable by Google, you're not getting SEO value from.
And I'd like to share a little bit about the PDF for vision loss and accessibility. One is you want to make sure that you're using a font that isn't going to blur when it expands. You want space between the lines of text, but there's another little thing that most people aren't aware of is Adobe gives you the opportunity to set the reading direction. And so sometimes it's set to read from top down instead of reading it to the screen reader the way a person would read, left to right, and then down the line, left to right. So you want to make sure that you're using good text, but also make sure the reading direction is set so that somebody with a screen reader doesn't have to fight the text in order to read it the way human beings read it.
That's incredibly interesting, Max. I was not aware of that. Do you know if that's like a default in Adobe? So you create a PDF and it defaults to a way or another with the reading
I think
direction?
it does default when you're creating slides. I think it depends on what aspect of Adobe you're using.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
we
a
ran
really good
into
tip.
that in designing a annual report for UVA, a certain department in UVA. And for any designers on the call, or if you've got a design agency you work with, InDesign has settings in there that can appropriately and make the PDF that you export from InDesign readable in the way that you set. I'm glad you mentioned that, Max. I'd forgotten about that.
Okay, the next question is, do you have recommendations for making SharePoint sites accessible when keyboard navigation isn't behaving as expected?
It's hard when you're using a third party and you don't necessarily have complete control. I'm not sure 100% everything you can do in SharePoint. If you have control over the HTML, then you can change how like tab targeting is working. If you don't have control over that, then unfortunately it's reach out to their support. But if you can control things at an HTML level, then you can control the targeting for keywords.
Nice. And sometimes you can overcome third-party issues by adding additional instructions for the people with disabilities that are going to have to navigate through those problems.
That's a really good point, Max. Like if you know it's a problem, it's a potential problem, why not give instructions? Be like, okay, well, we're sorry this isn't working, but use it this way.
All right. The next question is, what resources or training are available to our web developers if they're not familiar with ADA compliance?
That's a great question. There are so many resources out there. Just w3.org will get you there, but it can be overwhelming. I feel like ADA compliance as developer and designers, it is a thing where it's like, oh, we're supposed to do that. You're learning a thing at a time until you have some sort of familiarity, and then you seek out more information. But Susie, could we put together resources for these attendees to give you specific direction on how you can, depending on what you do with your company, where you can look to for help if you want to learn, or if you want to include your developer in that?
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, we've got a blog that gives the designer and developer tips in an infographic format that we had to pull out of the PDF and put in the blog as well. But I would say if you've got a development team you're working with and they just want to know where to start, feel free to have them reach out to us too. We're happy to talk to other developers and people working on sites to just kind of lead them as well. So we'll make sure that our contact information is available to you.
And I'd like to make a short comment on your developers. I recently learned that a lot of developers have at least some knowledge about accessibility or some care about it, but quite often the designers and the creators have very little, if any, knowledge or concern. And so you may also want to recommend to your design teams that they might want to share these resources with them as well.
There's a tip from an attendee. It says, just a tip, post your web accessibility policy on your site and ways for people to report accessibility issues.
Absolutely, Betsy. That's a great thing to do. We are starting to see clients want to do that more and more. And it's much better that you take accountability for it and give people a way to contact you, and that you are and have you fix the issue versus them filing a complaint with the Department of Justice or filing a lawsuit. So that's a great tip. And we're starting to see that more and more, Betsy, that people are posting their website accessibility policy. Because as soon as you post a policy, you have to be responsible for it. And I think that's the hesitation. You're saying, well, we are absolutely going to do this 100% of the time. And then as soon as you don't, then you're now responsible for it. So it's having clients take that responsibility, and businesses take that responsibility.
Any other questions? Mark?
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Melissa, Susie, and Max for your insightful presentation today. Please join Virginia Ability for our upcoming ADA Legal Update program on June 13th from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Thanks to everybody for attending today, and have a good rest of your day. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.